Om Nityo Nichanam Chetanas Chetananam Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadati Kaman Tamatmastam Yenu Pashanti Diraha Tesham Shanti Shashvati Netaresham Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. That one, the eternal among non-eternal things, the intelligence of the most intelligent ones, who, though ever one, nevertheless fulfills the desires of the many, that one, the realized souls, see as dwelling in their own self. To them belong peace, and to none else. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sabiryam Karbhavahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us all. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings, and may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Yes, and so may Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness here this morning at the SRV ashram, where we greet our live streaming audience, those of you who have joined with us today on Sunday, and those ashramites who are here in our SRV chapter in Hawaii, as we greet the beautiful dawn with our meditation about an hour ago, for an hour. And now we sit for an early morning satsang, part of which will be live streamed for the benefit of those students who are far flung, that is, in distant points, like these people from Oregon and Europe and other places where our students reside, and the general public looking on, those who are interested in spiritual subjects, as we are. Very much so. We've spent, some of us, 4 or 5 decades since our teens and 20s, focused on these teachings. When we first heard them, they made a great impression on us, and that's to our benefit and to our good karma. We will be thinking about these teachings in any other lifetime we might take, because of so much time that we've spent here on them in this particular lifetime. So, welcome, and join in with us now for about an hour or so as we take questions from not only some that were handed to me this morning, but also those of you who are live streaming might want to send a question over the email, over the web, and we will try and answer it and get to it as best as we can. This process is called Satsang, it's called Atma-vichara, called by different names. It's a process of question and answer around subjects that are spiritual, subjects that are religious, philosophical, cosmological, even metaphysical, and you get into talking about prana and life force and energy and so forth. So there's many levels. Also the level of sadhana, or practice. We're very keenly interested on that subject because spiritual practice is what cuts you in the image. So we want to make sure that we don't just hear the teachings and speak the teachings, but that we actually go and practice them. And that's very important in any subject, in any walk of life. But it becomes very apparent in spiritual life that you are able to cut yourself in the image and make yourself one with the Father and be the perfect, as we say here in this country. So with that said, we may follow along in that fashion of atmic inquiry into the nature of the self, with these astute questions that have come in. There are 4 here on the paper that I can take, and if I see anyone sending them in live stream, I will get the sign from our camera person, and we will try and answer them live as well. First question here is from class yesterday. I suppose that means last week.
No, Vedanta 101.
Oh, the Vedanta 101 class yesterday, yes. Why is it stated that liberation can only be attained during embodiment and cannot happen in other realms without a physical body? Why is this? What is missing outside human birth? What factors and capacities are there that are unique to human embodiment that allow for forward progress? So the questioner is putting emphasis on the fact that here in this world is where we make the greatest spiritual progress, and that in the heavenly realms, because we believe very strongly in the kingdoms of heaven within, or the kingdom of heaven within, but we also feel like there are gradated levels of consciousness. For instance, your dreaming state is one of those, and your deep sleep state is one of those. Your good mood today is one of those. Your bad mood today is one of those. Your mixed mood, your restless mood is one of those. This particular location is one of those. If you go out of the country, that's another location. For prisoners, inmates in a prison, if they're in their cell and then they come to my class, then they're in 2 different locations. Their consciousness is shifted, not just their body shifts. We want to make sure that we acknowledge ourselves as being more than a physical body with its problems of suffering and disease and illness and death and birth. Make sure that we know that the mind is also shifting. So, as the Buddhists say, if you have to shift consciousness, try and shift spontaneously with ease, without stress. You shift these levels of consciousness, say, for instance, this morning from getting up from sleep, all of a sudden to meditation. That's a very, very important shift right there, is why we meditate as soon as we get out of bed. Maybe a few people might wash their face and hands real quick and go immediately to the shrine before all of the experiences of dream have gone away, all the experiences you had in that other state of consciousness you just visited. So you want to become aware that there are different states of consciousness, different bodies you have. A gross body is not the only one. You have a subtle body. You have a causal body in deep sleep. What are these bodies and what do they consist of? And how does my consciousness move between them and so forth? So, if you want to use that analogy, you could say that you really can't do a lot of really good spiritual work in your dream tonight. You do it here on earth in the physical body. This is where you make solid progress. Dream is rather like heaven. You see, why on earth you make spiritual progress, in heaven you don't. Why is that? Well, for one thing, and it segues into this question that was sent here from Hungary, one of the students in Hungary, about mundane human life and so forth, and how to practice neti-neti, or discrimination between the real and the unreal. This state of heaven, you see, heaven-seeking soul, that's free of the physical body. See, I mean, here's where the problem is: embodiment. Birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death are called the 6 transformations. Add hunger and thirst, and you've got Buddhists' 6 billows, they call them. Billows like clouds coming from nowhere, you see, and going away. They rise and they fall, and they confuse and flummox the human mind and person. So this is happening to you when you change your states of consciousness, and you have to adjust, you have to stabilize, you have to balance, which is a part of that question too, which we will get to in a minute because it segues nicely. So back to this idea of heaven. If you were to take, say, an analogy, say, okay, heaven is my home, you see. So now I'm in heaven, and it's like sort of my home. I've got everything there. I've got food, I've got good relations, I've got harmony, hopefully, in my home, and peace, like heaven, you see. But you're always thinking freedom, freedom. There's another place out there called freedom. Sort of like I would sure like to go out there in nature, you see, away from my home, and get in the water and hike the mountains and so forth. We have two locations, right? So the man's in heaven and he's thinking, this is nice, real nice. But it's rather unreal nice too. See? So he's thinking, there's a place called freedom. I want to go there. It's like going to the country. I'm going to leave my house in the city. I'm going to go to the country. So he says, I think I'm going to do that. Now I'm going to leave heaven and I'm going to go to enlightenment. All of a sudden he becomes aware there's a third location. It's called work. It's called earth. He has to go do his job and get permission from his boss in order to get off of work so that he can go to the land of liberation, to the country. So just like that, you see, all souls have to come back to earth in order to get that permission. In other words, to do the work. This is the realm of work here. And that analogy gives you sort of an idea of how karma has to be, work has to be done here in order to free you from heaven, from that state of mundane life, everyday rounds of life, you see, so that you can get to an emancipated state. You can't go straight from heaven to emancipated state. I'm not saying absolutely. There's always exceptions to every rule. But the point is that if a man suddenly got liberation in a dream, you see, or he was in heaven and all of a sudden he said, I can now transcend heaven and go straight to enlightenment, the realm of formlessness. I will transcend God with form and I will go into the formless Brahman, like I will just jump into the ocean like a salt doll and I will disappear. See, if that happened to a person in dream state, he would have had to have set it up back in the waking state. He would have had to have set it up back on earth. He would have had to have gone to earth, snapped his fetters, and then been able to go freely into the land of enlightenment. Strike off thy fetters, bonds that bind thee down, of shining gold or darker, baser ore. No slave is slave. No slave is slave, caressed or whipped, not free, for fetters though of gold are not less strong to bind. So the bonds of heaven are gold bonds, the bonds of earth are iron bonds, and they both bind you. Swamiji put it there, Vivekananda, that is, that quote from the Song of Sannyasa, and put it very nicely in poetic form so that we could understand it. Songs and poems are good mediums for which we can understand these philosophical teachings. So, an answer to that question, it answers all those questions. What is missing outside of human birth? That ability to do spiritual practice and cut thy bonds. Say, peace to all, from me no danger be to aught that lives. Those who dwell on high, those who lowly creep, I am the self in all. All worlds, both here and there, do I renounce. All heavens, all earths, all hells, all hopes and all fears. Thus cut thy bonds. Sannyasin bold say Om Tat Sat Om. Another verse from that same song of the Sannyasin. So he wants you to renounce heavens, earths and hells, hopes and fears. It's a nice wish list for the person who wants to transcend heaven and get into a spiritually emancipated state, called moksha or mukti or kaivalya or freedom, enlightenment. So coming back to earth to do the work, to qualify yourself for such an ascension, an inward ascension, is necessary. And that's missing, say, in your dream state or in other states. Did you try and do sadhana tonight in your dream? Last night? Didn't work, did it? You're here now, you can do it now, so that's what we encourage. That's why I said at the beginning, one of the things that satsang involves is sadhana. One of the things you can write in question about, how do I do my sadhana? So let's look at the next question then, having answered that one in that fashion. It's a nice analogy. Heaven, emancipation, and earth, those are three locales, you see, and they're all interconnected. Here's one. The observance of neti-neti, that is, not this, is how that translates in English, which means I'm not the body, I'm not the five senses, I'm not the mind, I'm not the ego. That's called neti-neti when a spiritual aspirant does that in Vedanta. That is, you're looking at everything that changes and you're saying, that's not me. In order to come to that stable foundation, see, which I can see is my true self. It's unshifting. Not like going from heaven or earth to hell. It's in one place, it's stable. But it can become manifold, you see. It can project itself into different dream states, different levels of consciousness, if you will. So, the observance of neti-neti seems to exclude all involvement with mundane human life and its oscillations. How should one balance between worshipping God in mankind and living in observance of neti-neti? Oh, well, you don't need to. You just want more of both. You want to worship God more and you want to practice more neti-neti. When you're talking about involvement in mundane human life, that's what you want to balance, you see. If you're too involved in mundane human existence, mundane human convention was a phrase that our founder, Lex Hixon, used to say in his teachings, then you're too engaged in activity, you see. So it's one of the great attachments, isn't it, in this day and age we see. People have maybe enough money, they have enough cars, certainly enough cars. They have all sorts of things in their house, foods and everything, yet they're still so attached to work. So maybe they want to maintain that lifestyle. So, but they're beginning to, without knowing it, attach the mind to work and activity. So, Swami Vivekananda has made some stark statements in that regard. He said, for instance, duty is the scorching midday sun that burns the very vitals of humanity. Or he would say at another time, work is good for the gaining of knowledge, but that's its only facility. After a person gains knowledge, then they abandon the realm of works. That is, they abandon the realm of mundane human convention. They may still keep the work that's called obligatory work, the work that's prescribed by the scriptures, that is, raising a dharmic family, right livelihood, all the things that you will find, say, in the Eightfold Path of the Buddha or in the Four Fruits of Life of Tantra. So those kinds of things you keep to maintain, but you always maintain the balance, as the questioner says here. So I would say basically what you want to balance is this worshipping God and neti-neti together, and then watch out for the over-preoccupation with mundane human convention. See, let's say, for instance, if I can drum up another analogy, you're serving a bunch of little old ladies at a bridge club. See, they're all sitting around a table playing bridge, and you have to serve them cookies and milk and so forth and tea. See, so can you serve them if you join in the game? See, you have to be doing this. You see, you have to be doing this. So, in that way, a person who practices neti-neti is rather done with the game, you see, of mundane human convention. The old ladies might ask them, come and join. Yeah, this is an experience from my own life, by the way. Come and join us, you see. Oh, that's all right, auntie, or grandmom, or mother, you see. I'll just be in the kitchen, you know, serving. I'm not really into bridge or cards or talking, you see. So that's the way I am. So a person who's practicing neti-neti is rather like that. See, they're through with all games, and they just want to serve God and mankind as best as they possibly can, and that will take neti-neti, won't it? You'll have to have a certain amount of discrimination. That is, discrimination is not judgment or criticism about people involved in mundane human convention. Don't make that mistake. Sometimes in Buddhism and Vedanta, it seems like maybe the person is a little callous, you see, and or you get that problem with, oh, you're holier than I. Why don't you join in with me? Why don't you come and partake of this Maya that I'm embroiled in? But the person in neti-neti says, no, I'm really done with that, but I'll continue to serve you, and my discrimination, I'll keep that honed, thank you very much. See? So another analogy from simple daily life that maybe helps explain that question. I think there's a question from...
Yeah, and it wants to follow up on this one.
Yes.
Okay, this is from Suprema. Please discuss the practice of all this in contrast with neti-neti, especially the problem with seeing that in evil or corrupt acts. In evil or corrupt acts.
All right, the questioner is bringing in iti-iti as in contrasted to neti-neti. So iti-iti would be the graduation point, it would be the maturation of neti-neti. So it's sort of like shunyata in Buddhism, emptiness. Pretty soon it comes purnyata, fullness. Because now you have discriminated so much to know that mundane human convention is empty. It cannot fulfill you. And you've tried it again and again, but you can't seem to get that fulfillment out of it. Sort of like grasping water. So you're trying to hold air. It's always escaping you, that peace of mind and that contentment and those things, those qualities, you see. So you practice neti-neti or shunyata, and it's a stage, and it leads you to this fulfillment because you have actually succeeded in withdrawing from worldly preoccupations, mundane human convention, as it says here. And one will then eventually come to a stage of iti-iti, which means all those things that he had to discriminate against are seen as nothing other than Brahman. You just didn't know it along the way. You see, all of those things too were part of the process, and you really look back at them at that point from iti-iti, and you say, all of those things I had to discriminate against were just teachers. They were just road signs for me, pointers, indications. But the thing about iti-iti is it's not a practice. Neti-neti was a practice, iti-iti is an arrival point. And at that point you're seeing Brahman in everything, which Ramakrishna said was the last word in spiritual life. Swami Shardananda asked him once, or he asked Shardananda, what would you like? When he was a teenager, and Shardananda said, I want to see God in everything. And Ramakrishna said, oh, that's the highest possible attainment in embodied existence. As if to say, you can't have that yet. So you're too young, you're not quite ready for it. So Swami Shardananda just said, I'll wait. That's all I want. He was done with everything else, you see. The whole of the rest of the game he was through with. You can call it world weariness, that's mentioned in the scriptures, but makes it sound a little bit morose, doesn't it? Oh, world weariness, but that's actually rather what it is. And so a person needs to keep neti-neti, keeps that discrimination process going in the midst of everything. And that because they're searching for something that will replace what they gave up. See, so I can't pull something out by the roots, and then there's a emptiness there where the roots were, you see. So you have to, if you take away everything you thought was true, which wasn't true, it was fallacious, or it was mixed, or it was illusory, or it was ephemeral, or it was transitory, or it was changing, whatever, however you want to call it, you take that away and you finally get rid of that problem, and you're brooding on those problems. Like, I'm not peaceful, I'm not happy, I'm not content, even though I've got all this material around me, and I'm bored with it, you see, or I know there's something greater to attain beyond, and I can't put my finger on it yet. If that's the state, then you're going to want to attain this fullness, purnyata they call it. Yes?
Well, the other part of her question, maybe you were getting there, had to do with, and she was calling it a practice, all this, was how, she wanted to know how to do it in contrast with neti-neti, especially with the problem of seeing Brahman in evil or corrupt acts.
Oh, well, Brahman isn't in evil or corrupt acts, of course. It's transcendent of that. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, there's poison in a snake, but a snake doesn't die because of that. But you will die if the snake bites you. So the poison is really in you. It's in your mind, you see. So is the nectar. Brahman is free of dualities like that. Neti-neti and iti-iti don't occur in Brahman. There's no coming and going in Brahman, or bondage or liberation, or form and formlessness, you see. The poison is in the snake. Still, Brahman exists, and all those things are existing in it, but it's not existing in them. So we cannot mix in the philosophy. That's why you have to be very careful about your understanding of non-duality. However, if you're talking about yoga, that means sadhana or practice, then the question applies. You see, how do I continue to practice neti-neti so that I keep my mind wiped clean? You see, so that it can be an open conduit to the realization of Brahman, which is on the horizon for me if I'm a spiritual aspirant. I'm anticipating it. I'm not expecting it, I'm not attached to it, but I am anticipating it. You see, it is on the way, like a same wind blowing for 1,000 miles. That's a beautiful Zen koan. Same wind blowing for 1,000 miles. So that wind of enlightenment is everywhere. You see, and I'm just in anticipation of it all the time. I have that sort of feeling. So neti-neti is rather like that. You're keeping the field clean and clear, because the mind tends to, even after it's been swept clean, like a house, it'll continue to collect dust, like a house. So you have to go there every day with a broom or a vacuum cleaner and make sure it's always kept in fine and fettle shape. So that's as long as you're in the body. Then, as we said by that first question, if the body isn't there, then no matter, never mind. See, if matter isn't there, then you don't have to worry about it, like say in heaven, or of course heaven suggests a return to earth to complete the cycle. So that's why we transcend dualities. That's why Swamiji said, as I just quoted, all worlds do I renounce, all heavens, all earths, all hells, all hopes and fears. Those are all concepts in my mind, so I renounce them in order to get to this pristine state of awareness. So that's neti-neti, leading to iti-iti. In Vedanta, iti-iti isn't mentioned that much. They're not seeing a lot of people who are qualified for it, evidently, in this day and age, in the Kali Yuga, not even in India. See, so they're looking around saying, oh, these people need a big, strong dose of neti-neti. My teacher used to put it, the West needs an injection of Brahmagyan. And he was there to give it to them. I was there and I got several inoculations, you see. So Brahmagyan means the highest wisdom of Brahman, your own self. I and my Father are one type of wisdom, you see, that takes away the distinction between creature and creator, God and mankind, nature and spirit. Takes away those distinctions and shows how they're one homogeneous mass of pure conscious awareness.
Another follow-up question?
Another follow-up question, certainly.
Must one obtain nirvikalpa samadhi to obtain all this, all this?
It's very much like this question coming. Again, the yogas of action and inaction get involved. One can make a point for jnana and bhakti, that is wisdom and devotion, being correlatives with one another. Concomitants, you see, they exist together like two wings of a bird. Very hard to do that with action and inaction. These two yogas seem to be at odds and variant, you see. To bring together action and inaction, well, that's one of the most difficult things to do, and it's one of the most stultifying slokas in the Bhagavad Gita of Sri Krishna. Those who know action and inaction, and inaction in action, they truly know. What the hell is he saying? You see? So, how to bring together these yogas of meditation and karma, action. You might say that good karma that is that paves the way to freedom, that doesn't get in the way of your freedom. That's good karma, you see. It's a helpmate. So, that teaching is very rare. It's very difficult to get a handhold on, and it also connects very deeply with the problem of activity in karmic accrual. Those beings who have attained to a glimpse of Brahman, you could put it that way. I mean, I'm not saying had outright nirvikalpa samadhi, because even amongst our ideals here, Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, Swami Vivekananda, Swami Brahmananda, Turiyananda, Das Chanye, Vaye Parshada, Ramakrishna, Gata Prana, Sarvantan, Pranamamiham, all of those who had their life forces merged in Sri Ramakrishna, who took Sri Ramakrishna as their ideal, who saw him as the avatara of the age, avatara Varishtaya, as Swamiji called him, who saw him as God walking around on two legs. All of those people, up to 5 million now in this world, in a very short time. But at the time of his living in the body, that spiritual circle, you see, very few of them had nirvikalpa samadhi. There are other samadhis to have which are very high and very profound. There are samadhis of bliss, and there are samadhis of devotion, where you cry a lot. You see, you're having these very deep experiences of love for God. It's still in a rather dual state. You see, God and I are separate, and now I'm loving you, and will you please love me back? You see, and then samadhis of knowledge. Patanjali lists a whole set of samadhis of knowledge. So probably, and I'm getting around to the final answer to the question a little bit gradually, but nevertheless, we probably should look towards having those samadhis of knowledge, or maybe acknowledge that we are having them. It's not like something I have to attain. If I sit down and read a book, a scripture, which I should be doing, studying the scriptures, which also connects to one of these questions coming, then I'm in samadhi right there. If I'm in a sattvic mood, if I'm balanced, and I'm not restless and distracted, or I'm not falling asleep with the book in my hand, I probably shouldn't be studying at that time, you see. But if I sat there, just like I sit for a meal, I'm sitting for a meal of Jnana Yoga, aren't I? Aren't you interested in your food? Some days maybe you're not. You're kind of ambivalent. You see, oh, it doesn't taste that good. I'm not that hungry. My appetite's not good, you say. So then you get up and leave the table, your food unfinished. But usually you're fairly interested in your food. So this should be the case when you study the scriptures. So having said that, then you study the scriptures and you're balanced. You're in a kind of samadhi when you're doing that. And probably good for us to acknowledge that as Westerners, as souls living in the Kali Yuga. That will be a first step towards having these higher samadhis, you see. And of course, the higher samadhis then are going to take some very special kind of practice, not a lot of sweat, you see, and exertion. And, oh, you know, I've got to have this samadhi kind of thing. That might be an attitude, rajasic devotion, they call it, that you want to adopt at certain times. But there's also going to be the opposite of that, a real long abiding patience. Like we just said, Charananda said, I'll wait, right? I'll wait to have the vision of Brahman and everything. So he's willing to wait for a lifetime or more to have that ultimate vision. So nirvikalpa samadhi, rather like that, you see. In fact, I probably shouldn't even assume that I can have nirvikalpa samadhi. I should probably rather say it's my true nature. It will get to revealed to me by the Divine Mother of the Universe at the perfect moment. Auspicious timing, you see. And maybe I should qualify myself for that by having these other samadhis first. If you jump from the bottom step to the top step, you don't know what the middle steps are made of. So you can't just go from everyday life, all of a sudden vaulted into nirvikalpa samadhi, leaping for the highest state of awareness, you see. It could happen. Like I said, there are exceptions to every rule. But what about all those steps in between, you see, that actually set you up for staying in nirvikalpa samadhi? If you want to put this in the same system of Kundalini Yoga, you see how your chakras awaken one by one, and the lotus is spread out when Kundalini Shakti, like flowers, visits them, and you have to be aware that she's there, and you feel her rising. Sri Ramakrishna said, like ants going up a trunk of a tree sometimes, or like fish darting in waters. or like birds flitting from branch to branch. That's how he described this feeling of Ma Kundalini rising up the spine to different centers. So in that way, nirvikalpa samadhi would connect with the Sahasrara chakra, wouldn't it, at the crown of the head. And so can you go from root chakra to the Sahasrara, like somebody taking, at the circus, taking a big hammer and smashing one of those bells, you see? Consciousness can do that. I suppose it can, but then it doesn't remember anything that happened along the way. It's sort of like your deep sleep tonight, and you're dreaming, and you're waking. You right now can't remember anything that happened in dreaming and deep sleep last night. Or if you think a little bit, you can remember a dream maybe you had. So your consciousness was sojourning, and it wasn't bringing full consciousness to bear on every shift. When you shift and stabilize, do so without aggravation, without stress. So you have to develop a consciousness that's very, very gracious. You want to get your mind on your own side. There are even songs about it in India, getting your mind on your own side so that your mind will be your friend. Because Holy Mother said you can have a human birth, you can have a good teacher, and you can have a desire to be free. Those are the three great boons. A human birth, a good teacher, and a desire to be free. Can you get all three of those together in one life? If you can, you still haven't made the grade, because you need the friendliness of your own mind first. She said these three, she'd seen people have all three. Human birth, a good teacher, and the desire to be free. She'd seen that. Almost as if it were common, you see. Some people had attained that, but they fell from the goal because they did not have the agreement of their own mind, the friendliness of their own mind. They did not get their mind on their side. This is how important it is to control mind and senses, or else it'll go wandering off like a chariot with 5 horses, and each horse wants to take its own road. You know what I'm saying, the 5 senses, right? And they're dragging you here and there along different roads, and you never reach your destination that way. You probably split apart on the way. So this is the idea of qualifying yourself step by step, and nirvikalpa samadhi, or seeing God in everything, or awakening to the 7th chakra will happen in due time. Leave it up to auspicious timing. In the meantime, have those subsequent samadhis that you're actually getting by studying the scriptures and so forth. And that brings us to this next question. It's about yoga and the yamas, niyamas. It has been made clear in previous teachings and in the Gita that ahimsa, that's nonviolence, while having important observances on the level of morality, can be taken as to the non-dual conclusion, thou cannot kill. Does each yama and niyama have its own non-dual conclusion? If so, can you please briefly expound on a few of them? Well, he's taking the first of all yamas, that's the first limb of yoga. The very first thing you start out with really is nonviolence. I have become nonviolence. It's there in yoga, it's there in tantra. The very first qualification of a tantric aspirant, ahimsa. I must be nonviolent. It's there in Jainism, in spades. It's there in Buddhism. Everywhere you look, these systems are propounding and encouraging nonviolent. In thought, word, and deed. That's what they say, right? In thought, word, and deed. So in waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, the Jains say you shouldn't even commit a violent act even in a dream. You shouldn't kill anything even in a dream. So it's a very specific, and it's rooted there in the 8-limbed yoga, Patanjali, see. So to answer this question accurately, first I would say you probably want to look at the yamas, niyamas as already perfect. They're not something, they call them moral observances, and they call them early practices, you see. But really what they're all speaking of is a perfection that's already there before you practice. It's kind of non-dual in that way. They say, sometimes criticize yoga from a higher standpoint of non-dual philosophy because, it's a practice. You're still having to practice, so you're not perfect yet, you see. That's not really the best way to look at it. If the seers who are completely realized want to look at it that way, I have no problem with that, you see. But for those who are on the level of practice, they probably should start looking at the yamas and niyamas as things that are eternal principles. Say, for instance, ahimsa. You know, the man is talking about here about a teaching I used to give, that a commandment is different, a law is different than a dharmic teaching, you see. You could say, thou shalt not kill. Look at the state of Moses' people at the time, worshipping golden calf and having parties when he went away. See, they're jumping around. Are they ready for yoga or sadhana or anything? He has to come back and say, please do not kill each other in your partying here, you see. Some of you are going to insult each other when you get too much intoxicant in you, you see. The Jains say you should never have anything to do with anything fermented. No liquor, you see. So whatever the case may be, you have to realize that when you're talking about a law or a commandment, you're talking about a people who are confused, a people, a race that doesn't know up from down yet. They don't even have their morals and ethics together yet. But when you're talking about ahimsa, non-violence, you're talking about a much, much more refined thing. It's actually it's actually not just a moral law, it's a cosmic law. And it's so because you cannot kill anything, because it was never born. I mean, you better start looking into the non-dual philosophy about what your soul consists of. Your soul is unborn. It's eternal. Read my lips. See, the word eternal means something very specific. It means it's there all the time. Call it what you will. It doesn't get born and die. It doesn't come and then go away. They call it all pervasive. It's always there. That's your soul. So isn't that much, much different than saying thou shalt not kill? One's a moral law, the other one's an eternal law, a principle cut in stone. Now let's go to the next yama. If he wants a few examples, satyam. You're going to tell me that truth isn't eternal? That truth isn't non-dual? Are you going to drag truth down to other zones? Are you going to make it mithya gyan, false knowledge? Are you even going to make it the most important thing? Knowledge. No, knowledge is not the most important thing, because Krishna says in the Gita, you must realize the end of knowledge in truth. Knowledge leads to truth. So let's back up a little bit. Action should have led to knowledge. Knowledge then should lead to truth, you see. So the only purpose for action is so that you get a little knowledge going. Then once you've got that knowledge, you don't need to be involved in action anymore. It's not obligatory anymore. You have it. With knowledge, you get rid of ignorance, and then you live contentedly. Pass your time contentedly and be free, Shankara said. But then that has to go somewhere, you see. Just living contentedly, that's not going to do it. I want that freedom. I want that spiritual emancipation, which is my true nature, which is the peace that passes all understanding, you see. So then that means I'm going to want to realize the truth. So is truth just a yama? At the level of a yama, you're going to say, well, it's just that I should speak the truth all the time. But sometimes you're not supposed to speak the truth. You can't tell a harsh truth, Holy Mother said. It's not always wise to tell a harsh truth. So there's some sort of wisdom there in keeping it back, you see, holding it back. Not speaking it. In fact, Jainism, again, very, very specific about not using harsh words. It's a type of violence. So, those are a couple examples. You could go on listing all the yamas and niyamas, and you could see pretty much the same case for all of them. If you say you went to tapas, austerity, or ishvara pranidhana, devotion for God, or svadhyaya, study of scriptures, all of these things are already non-dual to begin with. And then you're just using them as a practice. So your mind comes to the yamas in a state of duality, or worse. It comes to them in a state of fragmentation sometimes, and say, oh, I need some help here. All right, well here, practice nonviolence. That'll get rid of those karmas, that guilt, that remorse, those bad feelings that you've accumulated inside you because you are committing violence on so many levels. So now let's practice nonviolence. So then, at that level, it's an aid, it's a help. But you must realize that it's a eternal principle first, and it's coming to you at the level of relativity to help you in your sadhana, to help you in your practice. So each of these yamas, not just taken to a non-dual conclusion, which is a part of your practice, but they actually are eternal principles, something already at hand. Now, final question here, as we're coming to the end, is that this person has read the Gospel and says, in the Gospel of Ramakrishna, he states that doing work detached from the result is very difficult, and one cannot do so until God has been realized. For the spiritual rookie, how can one begin to observe how their mind or ego on a subtle level is attached to results? For example, if one mows the lawn while chanting the Lord's name, it would seem the mind ego is directed away from results. But still, on a more refined level, there is some focus on the results. How can they see this seemingly concealed attachment in themselves? Well, I think probably you're getting a little bit carried away there. Those are small matters. See, the fact that you are practicing keeping your mind on God while you're going through work is very commendable. But remember, Holy Mother said when they asked her, "Do you always think of Brahman?" She says, "No. How's that possible? There's this work to do." See? So it's nice to take the ideal of God and everything into your work, but if you don't focus on your work, if something distracts you, even God, then your work doesn't get done well, you see. So it was more like when they went to her, you see, and she's kneading bread, and she's the mother of the universe, they say, you see. Ramakrishna's divine consort. He's already passed. Some man walks in, sees her kneading bread on the floor. Says, "Oh, I see you're just involved in work and Maya like the rest of us." She looked up from her work and said, "Oh yes, that's true, sir. There's this work to do, but unlike others, I can take my Atman out from my wearing cloth anytime I want and look at it. Can you do that?" So she can put work off. She can put it away. How many people can do that? We just said in answer to this second question that people cannot discriminate between the world and God. God inactive, the world active. Yeah. The yoga of meditation and the yoga of action. Yes, you're going to have to follow certain practices and certain rules to do the work in the world. And they're different. Both the tools and the fruits of that yoga are different than the tools and the fruits that you get into an inactive state by. Isn't it true? They're going to have to still the mind in meditation. But in work, you can't still the mind. It's got to be thinking all the time. If you're a carpenter, you've got to be thinking about that hammer coming down on the head of the nail. You see, can't go, "Oh, I want to think about God." Oh, you know. Well, you have to be focused and concentrated. So think of the hammer and the nail and the hand as God, and you don't want to commit violence on God, you see. However you will think about it, those are very important. So these two yogas are, like I said, could almost be seen as opposite of each other. So when you go into meditation, take those rules and look for those fruits that are applicable to that particular yoga. Be practical. To be spiritual is not to be a fool. Who said that? Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa in the Gospel. So good that you've read the Gospel. Go ahead, mow the lawn, chant the names of the Lord at the same time. That's all well and good. Just don't worry too much about your mind thinking too much of the fruits. Look out afterwards and say, "I did a good job." You see, pat yourself on the back. Or look out and see how you missed a few areas. You know, and how you can improve yourself. That's all part of the practice. It's all part of the process. Now, and probably end here, the first part of the question was that doing work detached from results is very difficult and one cannot do so until God has been realized. I would say that that's probably not what Sri Ramakrishna said in the Gospel exactly, or maybe it wasn't quite what he meant if he did say if the English translation did have those exact words. We're talking about Bengali to English to a devotee's mind and so forth. The point I'm heading towards here is that usually if you have realization of God, then you're probably not going to go back to work anyway. If you do, you're going to go back to it in a wholly different way than before you had realization of God. You're not going to have any of your ego invested in it, or any hopes for it, or any fears. Renounce all heavens, all earths, all hells, all hopes and fears, right? So that's one thing to be said about it. The other thing to be said about it is that there is a whole important cross-section of the process that is not just good for you, it's good for others. An avatar is like that. He comes, he's already perfected, he's a past master, yet there he is going through all the sufferings we are. So people think, oh, he must be imperfect. They don't know that he's perfected already. Krishna says, I have nothing to gain here anymore. I come here to work, to show people how to work right. That's all. So that's about the avatar. So back to us. Can we work right before we get God realization? Really almost a moot point, isn't it? Because when you get God realized, all action disappears. When you go into samadhi, like your dream state tonight, your deep sleep state tonight, you're not working. Your breathing is even cut down in half. So you're in a very, very quiet, peaceful, indrawn state. And you're fine there. You're peaceful. So what I'm saying here is, if I could take an example from my own life, I mentioned this morning practicing the cello at a young age and how it taught me concentration. So later on, I took that ability to concentrate on the cello and put it into meditation. Oh, I mastered to a certain degree that instrument. Now I can do the same thing with meditation. It's the same thing. It's the same concentration. So I used that power of dharana, sixth limb of yoga, to put it on spiritual life, and therefore was able to make some success, you see, some progress. Now, should I have waited till I became a perfect cellist before I began teaching my students? No, because there's no such thing as a perfect cellist. There is no perfection here. Every artist knows that, or finds it out eventually. There is no perfection here. You're looking for something that does not exist on earth. There is just a lot of imperfection here, a lot of mixed perfection and imperfection here. There's a fly in every ointment, you see. So the point of it all is that by going through the motions, Mother is making me an example for others. And if I had gotten God realization at the very beginning, cello, students, example, all of would have been out the door, you see, of no never mind. We don't see all the souls that get non-dual realization and go into formlessness forever and never return here. We don't see them. We only hear about those ones that make some sort of mark on society, like the avatars and a few popularized saints and some seers and so forth. But there are hundreds and hundreds of souls that, without the least, by your never mind, as my mother said, without any permission backwards or forwards to anyone, just give up the body and go into freedom. That's it. And their life was never viewed. See, in fact, if you had looked at your life, you wouldn't have thought that that person was a person that was even qualified for freedom. They were just passing through. Might as well put that on their gravestone. I was just passing through, you see. So that's my point about the rest of this question, is that God realization will make you unfit for work, most likely. Only certain kinds of souls will come back and be able to carry on any kind of work, and that kind of work that they do carry on, if you've looked at Jesus' life and Buddha's life and Ramakrishna's life, is very, very distinct, very, very special. For the rest of us, then we continue on working towards that highest enlightenment, no doubt. But as we work, we have to keep in mind that this is all a part of the process, that we're enacting our lives in front of collective humanity, in front of our ancestors. I often have the feeling that my ancestors are still looking on to what I'm doing. As most of them were not interested in what I'm doing right now. But now that they're out of the body, they're interested. I'm sure of it. I'm certain of it. And they have one supporter, one exponent of them, of their family, that is still in the body, you see, and is in the body for a specific purpose. To gain enlightenment. See? A man is born to no purpose who, having been given the boon of a human body, is unable to realize God in this lifetime. Sri Ramakrishna said that in the Gospel of Ramakrishna. So let's keep that in mind too, up until we do storm that final gate of non-duality and merge into Brahman, which we all do every night in deep sleep anyway, for a short period. You see, we get that formlessness which is akin to Brahman. So until that happens, we should say, everyone's looking on. The Sufi masters said that, you see. Kabir or Rumi, they all both had poems about that. It says, you should live your life as if everyone's watching. And at the end, no one should be able to say anything negative about you. That's how you should live your life. You should be the perfect exemplar to the best of your ability. So there it is in every tradition, and certainly here in the universal tradition we call Vedanta. So here we will end our satsang. Thank you for those wonderful questions from different points in the world. Thank you for the supporting ashramites here who came so early to meditation and who sat here giving their energy into these answers through me. And we will also be live streaming a class, the fourth class called Gaudapada's Non-Touch Yoga, or Advaita Yoga, this afternoon at 2:30 for those of you who want to look in. That's some 6 hours from now. So if you shut your computers, come back to it in 6 or 7 hours or so and come and join us on a 3-hour excursion through Advaita Vedanta, India's superlative philosophy. So here we can end with a chant. Om Sato Ma Sadgamoya Tamaso Ma Jyotir Gamoya Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamaya Abira Abira Mayiti Rudrayati Dakshinamukam Tenamam Pahinicham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, and from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Paramahanta